I've got the instant reaction to the breaking news that general manager Trajan Langdon is leaving the Pelicans to go to the Detroit Pistons. What's it mean for the draft? Who's going to replace Langdon? And how this impacts a Brandon Ingram trade? It's a bonus episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, here with y'all with a bonus episode of Locked On Pelicans. I literally had just finished recording the Friday show when the news about Trajan Langdon broke. So here's how this is going to go. We've got this bonus show. It's going to have 3 segments, going to be a little bit shorter. And then we're going to have the regularly scheduled show, the Friday show, come out a little bit later on YouTube. So it'll come out maybe around like 10 p.m. midnight or so, a couple hours later. And then if you're just listening on audio, it's going to be a kind of just a bonus show right here. So let's get into it because this is significant for New Orleans given the time of year. This is draft prep, free agency prep, right? Extension time and all of that. So losing your general manager is significant. Langdon was a very big hire at the time by the New Orleans Pelicans. He was one of the people that was a finalist for the job that ultimately went to David Griffin, and everyone was so impressed by him, they hired him to be the general manager, giving him a bump up in title and a significant amount of money. And when people talk about this organization being cheap, things like that, yes and no. There are some things they spend on, and Trajan Langdon was not a cheap general manager to bring in from the Brooklyn Nets, and now he's headed to the Detroit Pistons. So while David, this was probably inevitable. He's interviewed for a number of positions from around the league. It was only a matter of time till he got one of them. Again, this is someone who is highly regarded around the league. And look, if other teams are trying to poach your talent, we're going to talk about that with Borrego in the next show that's coming. That's a good thing. That says something about what they're doing, because if they were bad at their jobs, they're not getting other jobs here. There's just too much at stake. So while David Griffin is the top decision maker in New Orleans, you can kind of view Langdon as the number 2. And Langdon was involved with a lot of the trades, a lot of the draft work and prep with all of that. I don't think people really understand the way a front office works. While David Griffin has the final say, there's a lot of delegating going on. And one of the things they do in their meetings is, hey, here's an objective we have. Maybe it's shed salary. Maybe we need to add creation. We need to add more shooting. And then your 10 or so people that work in a front office come in with trade ideas. So Langdon the next day would have come in with a trade idea. So would other people, and more on who will replace Langdon in a minute. That's kind of how the front office works. It's not just David Griffin telling people how it's going to be. There's a lot of collaborative input and getting different ideas and different, sets of thinking in there. So Langdon has been credited with that trade, sending out Devontae Graham when they were trying to shed salary. Whether you agree or disagree with that, if that's the stated goal, he's the one that kind of came up with that deal, and maybe it was the best one. He's done a lot of work when it comes to drafting players and championing some of those guys. More on that with Bryson Graham. Keep that name in mind in the next segment here. So that's generally how these front offices work, and if Langdon's doing a good job there, and the Pelicans just had their second best, third best season in franchise history in terms of regular season wins. There's talent here on the roster. We're a couple months removed from saying, hey, is this the deepest team in the league? Which I disagreed with, but you get what I'm saying. They've done, while this season didn't go the way we'd like, and we'd like them to be further along, there's still a lot of good here, and I don't think it's worth losing sight of that. So losing Langdon is pretty significant, but you want to be the number 1 guy. And, at the top, you tend to have, say, over more than just, the roster, the coaching staff, all of that. And he's got some big decisions to make over there in Detroit. So coming up next, let's talk about who's going to replace him and what that means when it comes to the draft, free agency, and all of that. Because while I think losing Langdon is a pretty significant thing and not in a good way, I think this is a loss for New Orleans, someone that's that kind of highly thought of. They're in better position than you think. And they've got someone waiting in the wings that I think is going to do a really good job. That's coming up here next in a shorter bonus episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's bonus episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role, and that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs is the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire, gives you access to professionals you can't get anywhere else. LinkedIn does all of that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, let's keep going. It's a bonus episode. We're going to make this a little bit quicker today because we have a full show coming later for you. So I do think this is a loss for New Orleans, but I think they're in pretty good position to be able to kind of keep moving forward. This is a key time. The combine was just a couple of days ago. You're planning out your big board. You're going to be bringing players in for workouts. Who you bring in, who you kind of look towards is dictated by the front office, and different people like different names, and that's all a collaborative thing, and that's really important to look at. Likely who is going to take over is Bryson Graham. He is the assistant general manager, so basically one step below Trajan Langdon right now. He's been with New Orleans since 2010, coming on as an intern, then being the player development director, basketball operations associate, the video coordinator, then a scouting coordinator, then the director of college scouting, and then being the assistant general manager. So he's done a little bit of everything here. Front office, coaching staff under Monty Williams, and now back to the front office where he's likely going to become the next general manager. This is someone who's thought of very highly around the league as well. And in fact, his name was linked to this job with the Detroit Pistons. He is listed on the Athletics 40 under 40 from just a couple of years ago, looking at who's going to be another GM, who's kind of the up and coming stars in a front office. And he was named that. So if this is the person they end up promoting, and it seems like that, I think they're in good hands. There have been some misses in the draft, but overall, they've done a pretty good job recently. We're happy with Jordan Hawkins. Dyson Daniels has potential. Herb Jones was a steal. Jose Alvarado was also good. You know, outside of that first draft, that was a bit of a miss, and Cairo Lewis Jr., they've overall done pretty well here. Bryson Graham, with that continuity, I think is important. And Graham has been publicly credited with pushing for Trey Murphy and Herb Jones in that draft. They've given him the credit for that. So bringing in that guy who kind of championed those players. And again, that's how it works in the front office. When you're talking about prospects, if it's someone he's scouting goes, oh, I think this guy is good. David Griffin wasn't doing that. That's other people in the front office who are bringing that to Griff and kind of helping inform his decision-making process. So Trey Murphy is on the team probably because of Bryson Graham and his scouting and how he saw Trey's development going. I don't mind that person being the general manager and kind of number 2, number 3 in this organization when you look at it from a front office perspective. While Trajan was there, at the combine for the Pelicans with Swing Cash, Willie Green, and also everybody else was there too, having that continuity for what they're doing, what they're trying to build is good. You have someone who knows what the flaws on this team are because they're plain as day. And Bryson Graham, I think, is going to be working to help address that. Keeping good, young, up-and-coming talent on this, around the franchise is a great thing. So I think Bryson Graham is going to be the person they give that role to. And I think it means that you kind of just move forward with your draft prep, no problem. There's not going to be any disruption to it. They need to make a decision on that Lakers pick by June 1st. They could have that pick, which is the 17th in the draft. They also have the 21st pick. And as we've talked about on the show a bunch, that you have impactful players there at 21. And if Bryson Graham is going to help them get a guy that can play and be impactful as they push to get back into the playoffs next season and go further and grow as a team, that I think is exactly what you want. There's no hiccup. There's no lack of continuity or anything like that. And I think that's kind of important for what the Pelicans need right now. They need to shake up the roster, and this front office knows that. And I think that's the most important thing. So keeping the guys that have been doing the good job. We love Trey, right? We want to see him in the starting lineup. We love Herb Jones too. Want to see both of them in the starting lineup is only going to be a good thing. Small market, having a little bit of disruption isn't good, particularly for a key year for New Orleans. So expect Bryson Graham to step in and expect them to also then try and hire someone else to also be in that front office. So you're going to get a little bit of an injection of new voices, different people. But overall, again, 49 wins last season in an insane Western Conference is pretty good. And I think the Pelicans are setting themselves up to at least kind of build off of that some more here. But we'll see if there's more disruptions. More on James Borrego in the other show that I've already recorded, which is coming later. I will be in the same Tulane shirt here. Roll away. So coming up next, how's this impact Brandon Ingram? Because I think this removes a trade partner. Partner is the right word for it. That's not ideal. Let's talk about that coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Right now, though, I'm excited to tell you about eBay Motors because I use them all the time. Got multiple cars. They're all running because of eBay Motors. So I have my daily driver. Then I have the old classic car that I'm fixing up. And it's running because of eBay Motors. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, whatever it is you're looking for, speed, power, style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your vehicle, you're always going to find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's guaranteed fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home a win. Keep your vehicle alive over at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. Okay, let's keep talking. We don't need the usual stuff in here. It's a shorter bonus show here of Locked On Pelicans, the instant reaction to Trajan Langdon heading to Detroit. What's next for New Orleans? I don't think much changes. The next course of business is the draft and trying to figure out a trade for Brandon Ingram. And you'll hear me even say this in the next show, which is already recorded, mind you, that I think Detroit isn't going to be the landing spot. I was already feeling that, and then this news kind of definitely solidifies that. Trajan Langdon saw up front kind of what was going on with Brandon Ingram and everything this season. So unless he really loves Brandon Ingram, I don't think that's the type of person that he's going to want to put on this team. And depending on what their ownership mandate is, win now, be competitive now, and it sounds like that's what it is. I don't know if Brandon Ingram's the guy that he's going to go for. So this limits Brandon Ingram's trade market just a little bit, I think. That's not ideal because I think there's another team, the Cleveland Cavaliers, that might be out of the running based on a hire that they make. James Borrego, that's what the next show is going to be. So this limits the trade market for Brandon Ingram. It could mean that maybe he stays here in New Orleans if that's kind of how it goes. Hopefully that's, if you get him at the right price, that's fine, but he needs to change as well. But that just means you're losing leverage in negotiations with Atlanta, with the Philadelphia 76ers, or any other team that you might have negotiations with, or that could be interested in shaking up their rosters too. So this is almost, you could almost say that if you trust the Bryson Graham continuity, that Langdon going to the Pistons is worse for a Brandon Ingram trade than like anything else. Like that's the worst part of this here. Well, I think losing a smart person in Trajan Langdon who's well respected around the league definitely hurts. Not having a trade partner for Brandon Ingram could be the worst thing. And I think if you're looking for kind of like one thing of like, is this a disaster? I think that it's not a disaster, but you'd like to find the right trade partner and to try and kind of, get the right fit. If you were trading Brandon Ingram for the third pick, Jalen Duren, that makes a lot of sense. It's salary filler too, right? Like that's the trade that I would have liked. I don't particularly want Jaden Ivey here, but I don't see that being the case here really anymore. And I think that kind of really rules out what's happening on the Brandon Ingram trade market. We'll see if they find other deals though. And we're going to be covering that here on the Locked On Pelicans podcast. So that's it for a bonus episode of Locked On Pelicans. Just wanted to rush and get this one out. Full show coming a little bit later tonight. And I think that's where we'll have a deeper dive on James Borrego, get into other kind of changes to this team too. I think they'll be okay in the long haul with this, but this is definitely a loss. And look, good for Langdon. Good for Langdon. He gets to be the number one running a Pistons team that has some interesting decisions to be made. So that's going to do it for a bonus episode of Locked On Pelicans. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. We'll be back with y'all in a couple hours with the like normal full show. See y'all then.